Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Tim and Tom's Film Nights, where we continue our journey through the world of cinema. This week's film is one that's sure to stir up some strong emotions, Bone Tomahawk. I must say, this was an interesting choice for us, Timothy.
Oh, really, Thomas? And why do you say that?
Well, as someone who generally enjoys horror films, I found it passable. It had its moments of tension and gore that I appreciate in the genre. However, I know you're not a big fan of horror, Timothy. How did you find this film?
To put it lightly, Thomas, I didn't enjoy it much at all. It was just too gruesome for my taste. But that's to be expected with a horror film, isn't it? The story itself seemed quite unoriginal and predictable to me.
Ah, now you see, I disagree there, Timothy. While the plot might not have been groundbreakingly original, I think the way it was executed made up for that. It kept me engaged throughout the film. And besides, isn't a good horror film supposed to make you feel uncomfortable and uneasy?
Well, that may be true for some people, Tom, but I prefer films that challenge my emotions in different ways. The violence in Bone Tomahawk just felt unnecessary and gratuitous at times. I'd rather watch a film with a captivating story or characters I can relate to.
Ah, interesting perspective, Timothy. But what about the performances? Surely that counts for something in any film, even one like this?
All right, Thomas. Let's talk about the actors. Kurt Russell was decent enough as Sheriff Hunt, but I found Patrick Wilson's character more interesting. As for Matthew Fox's portrayal of Brooder, well, let's just say he played his part well enough to make me uncomfortable.
Well, now you mention it, Timothy. I agree that the characters were one of the stronger points of this film. Each actor brought something unique to their role, which added depth and complexity to the story as a whole. And speaking of complexity, how did you feel about the Native American representation in this movie?
That's an excellent question, Tom. I must admit, I found it rather troubling at times. The depiction of the cannibalistic tribe seemed stereotypical and offensive to me. It felt like they were used solely as a source of fear and disgust without any real nuance or understanding.
I see your point there, Timothy. While I didn't find it as disturbing as you did, I can appreciate your concern about the representation. However, I feel like this film's main focus was on the horror elements and not so much on cultural sensitivity.
Well, we can agree to disagree on that one, Tom. Overall, I'd say Bone Tomahawk is not a movie I would recommend to anyone who isn't particularly fond of horror or gore. There are certainly better films out there that explore similar themes without resorting to such excessive violence.
Well, as someone who generally enjoys horror and finds this film passable at best, I have to respect your opinion, Timothy. But for those of you watching at home, what do you think about Bone Tomahawk? Do you agree with us? Or does it stand out as a favorite among the horror genre? Let us know in the comments below.
Well, Tom, I believe we've discussed Bone Tomahawk to the best of our abilities for now. As usual, we have different opinions on the film, which is what makes these discussions so entertaining. Before we move on to another topic, would you mind sharing with us some interesting behind-the-scenes tidbit about Bone Tomahawk? I know you're a bit of trivia buff when it comes to films.
Oh, Timothy, you know I always have something interesting to share. So did you know that director S. Craig Zahler actually wrote the screenplay for Bone Tomahawk while working as a scriptwriter on the television series The Walking Dead? Pretty impressive, huh? And speaking of connections, some fans might not be aware that the film's plot was heavily influenced by an actual historical event known as the 19th century bone-eating incident. In 1874, a group of prospectors in Wyoming stumbled upon a Native American burial ground, unknowingly contaminating their food and water supplies with the remains. As a result, they suffered from severe bone and tissue damage, leading to their macabre nickname. Anyway, let's move on to our next film, shall we?
Oh, I did not know that about Zahler's involvement in The Walking Dead. That is quite impressive indeed. And now I'm even more curious about the connection between Bone Tomahawk and the bone-eating incident you mentioned. It seems like there are always fascinating stories waiting to be uncovered behind the scenes of these films.
Ah, yes, Timothy. This is what makes filmmaking so intriguing. The intertwining of historical events, personal experiences, and artistic vision all come together on the silver screen. Now, let's move on to our next topic, which concerns the soundtrack of Bone Tomahawk. I must say, it was one aspect that really stood out for me.
Oh, really? I confess, I usually don't pay much attention to the music in horror films like Bone Tomahawk. It tends to be more of a background noise for me, serving only to heighten the atmosphere of dread and unease. But I'm always open to hearing about hidden gems, Thomas.
Well, this particular gem is not so hidden, my friend. The score was composed by Jeffrey D. Sherrill, who has worked on various films like Texas Chainsaw 3D and the Halloween remake. What caught my attention was his use of traditional Native American instruments like the flute and the drum, which added a layer of authenticity to the film's setting and tone.
I can see how that might enhance the immersion factor. However, I still struggle with the overall horror genre. Maybe if they had toned down the gore just slightly, it would have been more palatable for me. But that's just my personal taste. So what do you think, Tom? Would you recommend Bone Tomahawk to someone who shares my reservations about the genre?
Ah, Timothy, I see you're still resistant to the charms of horror films. But hey, that's what makes us such a great duo, don't you think? We bring different perspectives and tastes to these discussions. As for recommending Bone Tomahawk to someone with similar reservations as yours, I'd say it depends on their tolerance for gore and violence. If they can stomach the graphic nature of the film, then perhaps they might find something enjoyable in the storytelling or the performances. But let's move away from Bone Tomahawk for a moment and shift our attention back to the soundtrack. You mentioned that you don't typically pay much attention to the music in horror films like this one. However, there are some composers who have truly mastered the art of creating hauntingly beautiful scores that complement the visuals perfectly. One such composer is Ennio Morricone, known for his iconic work on spaghetti westerns like Django, Unchained, and The Good, The Bad, and The Ugly. But he also dabbled in horror films, most famously with Lucio Fulci's 1980 movie City of the Living Dead. The eerie yet enthralling score adds an extra layer of dread to the already terrifying scenes, making it a must-listen for fans of the genre. So, Timothy, do you have any favorite horror film soundtracks or composers that you'd like to share with our viewers?
Well, Thomas, I'm more of a classical music enthusiast myself. However, there are some composers who have managed to create chillingly effective scores for horror film. For instance, John Williams' haunting theme from the film Jaws, which is actually a variation of the main theme from his earlier work, the Making of Jaws score. This iconic theme has been imitated countless times in the genre and continues to evoke a sense of dread and unease even today. As for specific actors in Bone Tomahawk, I thought Kurt Russell did an adequate job as Sheriff Hunt. He exudes a certain stoic determination that fits the character well. However, it was Patrick Wilson who truly stood out for me. His portrayal of the troubled and tormented Samantha's husband, John Bruder, was simply heartbreaking. The range of emotions he conveyed throughout the film, from desperation to resignation, is truly remarkable.
Ah, I see we both mentioned our admiration for John Williams' work in horror films. However, let's not forget about the performances of the supporting cast members, who also played crucial roles in Bone Tomahawk. Lili Simmons, for example, portrayed the strong-willed and resourceful wife of the deputy. Mary, who is kidnapped by the cannibalistic tribe. Her determination to survive against all odds is truly inspiring. And then we have Evan Jonigkeit as the arrogant and self-absorbed son of the town's mayor, Bud, who embodies the worst qualities of wealth and privilege. His naivety and hubris ultimately lead to his downfall, which serves as a cautionary tale for those who underestimate the danger lurking in the unexplored territories. Finally, special mention goes to David Arquette as the hapless and cowardly pharmacist, Dollarhide. While his role is relatively small, he brings comedic relief to otherwise grim circumstances with his nervousness and indecisiveness. His transformation from a weak-kneed townsman into a surprisingly resourceful ally for the group adds depth to the story and provides moments of levity amidst the bloodshed. So, Timothy, what are your thoughts on the cultural impact of Bone Tomahawk? How does it challenge or reinforce stereotypes about Native Americans in contemporary cinema?
Well, Thomas, you're right about one thing. Bone Tomahawk does challenge some stereotypes regarding Native Americans in film. The cannibalistic tribe portrayed in the movie is not representative of all indigenous peoples and serves as a cautionary tale rather than a depiction of reality. However, it's important to note that the film also perpetuates certain stereotypes by relying on tropes like the noble savage and the white man's burden. For instance, Kurt Russell's character, Sheriff Hunt, is portrayed as a heroic figure who single-handedly saves the day despite being vastly outnumbered. This trope suggests that white characters are inherently more capable and courageous than their Native American counterparts. Additionally, there's the issue of historical accuracy. While it's true that some indigenous groups in North America have been known to practice cannibalism under certain circumstances, it's important not to generalize or sensationalize these practices for dramatic effect. Overall, I would say Bone Tomahawk's cultural impact is a mixed bag. It challenges some stereotypes while perpetuating others. As with any film that deals with sensitive topics like this one, it's crucial for audiences to approach it with an open mind and critical eye.
Well said, Timothy. And in conclusion, while Bone Tomahawk may not be everyone's cup of tea, it does offer some compelling performances, atmospheric horror, and a gripping narrative about the complexities of human nature. It certainly challenges conventional tropes while also raising important discussions about cultural representation in cinema. So, dear viewers, we encourage you to watch Bone Tomahawk. Join us in our weekly film nights and share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Remember to subscribe, like, and share this video if you enjoyed our discussion. Until next time.